All right, what's going on? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening? Peace and power elevation beat to all you beautiful folks out there. This your girl Tiffany coming through here live in effect. And before I get started, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, share the channel, and all that great stuff. So today's subject is going to be about Fannie Bell Chapman. Fannie Bell Chapman is a gospel singer, or she was a gospel singer and a healer. Okay, she was from Mississippi. And also, you can see that I'll talk a little bit about Mississippi Rootworkers. So, what got me on this path is a video that I seen on TikTok where someone posted a documentary about her and her life as a gospel singer and someone that was a healer in the church. Okay, so she came up out of Centerville, Mississippi, right? And one of the reasons why it's important because it goes back to the concept about hoodoo. So we learned about the hoodoo petitioners at the time period. So when you think about those who practice hoodoo, voodoo, and all of that, it's not somebody who just casting spell or walking around with their face painted up, which is part of the ritual, but not necessarily. Somebody who's a hoodoo petitioner can be somebody in the church, can be that mother in the church, that well respected elder, right? That could be that pastor. Okay, someone that's laying hands on you. So by this woman doing a lot of healing work and not only singing a lot of gospel music, that was a practice that our ancestors did, not only during slavery, but after slavery. So it's very common in the South, especially when you go into the rural towns, what we call the country. If you go into the country side of the various parts of the city, I mean, not in the city, but the various parts of the states. Like if you go to, you know, down in the low country area, you will see a lot of the hoodoo practice and woodwork and all of that. Now, this doesn't mean that because somebody practice root work, they can heal everything. No, there's certain disease that you cannot heal, and there's certain things that you have to go to the doctor for to get medication. Okay, to make sure that you are careful. So, I'm for conventional medicine and also for contemporary medicine. So, contemporary medicine deals with holistic healing. Conventional medicine deals with over the counter medicine, getting shots, pills, and whatnot. Okay. So I was able to come across a few information regarding to Fannie Bell Chapman. And also I got some sources that goes into the concept about the root work in the mid south. So let's go ahead and get started. Make sure again you like the channel, share the channel, hit the notification bell. So let's go into one book that I have. It'll be easier for me to go on Google. All right, so this book is called Give My Poor Heart Ease, Voice of Mississippi Blues by William Ferris. I revive in these stories by Toni Morrison. That's the quote. All right, so it's the ebook. Okay, and this was written by William Ferris, and also there was a documentary that he did, which deals with the center. What's it called? The Center of Southern. Let me look at the documentary. It's called Center for Southern Folk Life. That's the name of it, Center for Southern Folk Life. So now this is just some of the information that I was able to come across about her life. Um, so let's go to the page on here. All right. All right. So right here on this page, it goes into Centerville, Mississippi. So this book deals with the gospel music and also the origin of blues, Mississippi blues. Okay. So Mississippi was very, I mean, blues was very prominent in Mississippi and also in Tennessee area. Okay. So you have various type of blues, but it started in the heart of the South. So right here, Fannie Bell Chapman was a charismatic faith healer who composed gospel music that she sang at religious ceremonies she conducted in Centerville. So Centerville was also the home of Ann Moody, whose book Coming of Age in Mississippi chronicled her struggles during the civil rights movement. So Chapman was part of a long important tradition of black women who sang and healed outside the male dominated church, denied access to the pulpit. These women became spiritual healers who performed their own religious ceremonies. They took their healing into the streets and back roads of their community and had significant impact on their followers. Chapman described her healing ceremony as a hallelujah time. During the ceremony, the spirit descended and people were possessed. Some spoke in tongues, and Chapman healed the sick. During one memorable ceremony in her living room, the floor began to shake as worshipers danced. Chapman continued to sing as she waved her hands, and some dancers out of the house and into her backyard, where she continued the ceremony. So the author goes on to say, I first met Fannie Bell Chapman when I was recording blues singles around Centerville in the late 60s. I recorded her gospel music and interviewed Chapman and her family. Impressed by the quality of her music, I returned in 1972 with Judy Picer and made a documentary film on Chapman and her family entitled Fannie Bell Chapman Gospel Singer that was produced by the Center for Southern Folklore. As a folklorist, I was deeply influenced by Chapman. She told me I had power eyes and that with help from her, I could have power to heal with my eyes, she said. I know because I have the same power. Chapman told me that she also had the power to control weather and could summon a thunderstorm. While she could do more than heal if she wished, she chose to only use her healing powers. We had a very special relationship for which I am grateful for. All right, so then the author goes on to state that Chapman kept her backyard swept clean. The yard was an extension of her house and outdoor room shaded by trees. Here she taught her grandchildren games, served them food, visited with friends and family, and held healing ceremonies. The space provided a cool, natural environment for both daytime and nighttime activities. A gospel singing band drawn from a single family is common in the South. Family groups who perform sacred music range from the nationally known staple singer who moved from Drew, Mississippi to Chicago to those who are locally celebrated like the Chapman family. So family is clearly an important link through which music is passed from generation to generation. During the during the summer, Chapman often fed her grandchildren in the backyard. She offered them Coca-Cola and crackers spread with peanut butter and jelly. The five daughters of Fannie Bell and Fred Chapman, and Nora Chapman, Valima Singleton, Rose Marie Dahl Moody, Shirley May Cotton, and Betty Franklin lived with their husbands and children in a compound of homes near their parents. So the Chapman family performed in Centerville area and conducted healing ceremony at the invitation of local families. When someone was ill, either in the hospital or at home, Chapman went to them and conducted a healing service. As a traveling band, she and her family reached out to the sick. Yeah, reach out to the sick people wherever they were located. This interview is drawn from my visit with Fannie Bell Chapman in 1968 and 1972. Our conversation took place in her home, often with her husband, children, and grandchildren listening. So, as we can see here, the author had the chance to actually interview Miss Chapman, right? But also, when he did the documentary, which came out in 1975, it was basically going into more detail of her life growing up in Mississippi and how she got involved in the church. All right, so church has been a big part of our ancestors in the South because, of course, many of them could not practice any other religion out in the open, so they practice Christianity along with African tradition. And as I mentioned about the praise house, if you ever get a chance to watch the documentary, and you can look it up in the description link, you will see that the church looked like a praise house because that's what it was. So a lot of the slaves had praise houses they would go to and they worship. They praise the Lord that way, and they would do healing. Okay, they would do the wook work. So that's what they did. Now, it goes on to talk about. She goes on to describe her life and give a background on how she grew up, what type of family she came from. So it said that I was born in Wilkinson County to a place that you call Capperville, Mississippi. I was there until I got married. After that, I moved to Centerville and to Emmett County. I can say that I am truly a Christian and a church worker and a missionary of the praying brand here in Centerville, Mississippi. I praise, I pray for the sick people and go into homes and hospital. I have so much missionary work to do until I can hardly get around to it. We just a family, a family that prays together, stay together as a hallelujah. You know what I mean by hallelujah. We be singing and having a jolly time, loving one another. When it gets to where the music be sounding good, we reach back and get our guitars and our drums. You talking about a hallelujah time. We have it then. Yes, we have it together. Oh my Lord. All my songs comes in an inspiration. My mouth fly open just like a mockingbird. And I sang through and I sang though I ain't never heard that song in my life. I cried when God spoke in his holiness and said to me, you must be born again. I just cried and said, oh Lord. Y'all, I say, come here. Oh my goodness, I got something. One early morning at the rising of the sun, I called my baby girl and said, get on your piano and play this for me. The background and everything was all together and my mouth just opened up and sang. So this the chorus right here. God spoke, yes he did. He spoke in his holiness. God spoke, he spoke in his holiness. God spoke, he spoke in his holiness. He said that you must be born again. Oh, God spoke, yes he did. To Daniel in the lion's den, God spoke. To Daniel in the lion's den, he said that you must be born again. So I'm not gonna go any further, right? And then go down, it says, I've been carrying it ever since everywhere I went at my churches. They say it's one of the most beautifulest songs they ever heard in their life. And I told them the spirit of God moved upon me and I had to sing it. I just hoping one day that my song would go all over the world. All right, so that's her. Okay, that's Miss Fannie Bell Chapman. And then she said, I came up in singing school, Sunday school, and whatnot. My daddy, he always used to read the Bible to us. My mother, she couldn't read nothing but an Aramaic. Daddy would get that Bible and read it to her. I would lay there and listen to him. And I would take every word in. Oh, Lord, I take in every word. And I'm glad now today I did. There's no more beautiful thing in the world, than a family that loves one another like my children love me. And I love my children and my grandchildren. I just love them. And if I didn't love them, I wouldn't have so many around me. I brush them away. Sometimes I have to get them back, They just huddle around. They huddle until they see me point my finger. That means go. That means go. I just about forgot all these singing game until they got to playing and singing. Then they come back to my remembrance. They sang Little Sally Walker, sitting in a saucer, weeping and a crying for a cool drink of water. Rise, Sally, rise, wipe your weeping eyes, put your hands on your hip, let your backbone slip, gotta shake it to the east. And so she goes on to basically talk about how she was singing that song back in the day, and then the kids in the area, her grandchildren, they would sing the song. They would, as they was playing with each other, right? Um, so it says they just be shaking it out there and be playing and having a good time. Say we used to sing that way back when we used to go to school. They say, "Oh, Big Mama, they used to sing that then." I told them, "Yeah, they used to sing that. That's way back stuff." When I was a little tiny thing, my daddy and my mother would fix my dinner, and every time they would feed me, I would leave the house. They didn't pay too much attention to me as a little thing. I left so many times from the dinner table, I would crawl on out, huddle out some way. I was big enough to hold my plate and get out to where I was going. My dad said, that girl, that was the way my daddy taught. He said every day that baby gets out and goes somewhere. Every time we finish eating, she not in the house. She outside somewhere. Tomorrow I'm going to watch and see where she is going. So the next day, my dad and my mother watched me when I got down with my little pan and went on outside. They didn't feed me on a plate. It was a little pan. When I went out the door, they watched me, my daddy, and my mother. And as little old thing, I huddled on up to a bushy place where my dad sat there, used to be an old well. I went up there. Hmm. And then she goes on to say, Daddy said, "Oh Lord, I wonder where is my baby going." I huddled on, went on up there to the well, and I sat down there, and when I huddled up there, a great big snake came up out of that old well that was filled with lots of trash and bricks and things. The snake came wobbling on up by my plate, and I taken and give him some of my food. He opened his little mouth and licked the food, and I took what was left and ate it myself. My dad said he liked to faint when he seen that. He didn't know what to do when he seen that. He got him a stick, but the snake went back down in the hole before he could get there to kill it. So he burnt it up instead. So basically, she used to go into the well and just sit by the well. And one day she sat by the well and she saw a snake, and she fed the snake. She wasn't intimidated. She wasn't scared of it or anything like that. She just fed the snake, and the snake ate and went back into the water. Right. So, basically this is the country life. This was like growing up in the country. So then she goes on to talk about her healing. Let's go down. Let's skip down just a little bit. So she said nails and different cuts will cause the lockjaw, and it all comes from that old blood. You see, that blood is going to infect back up in you. That's going to bring swelling and will poison your blood, from the draw of suction of that blood. All the time is working in you like that. It'll get snatched up in there and go on without you knowing until it form a good doctor scrape. But if I can get to it, it won't cause no more trouble. A little old girl got cut and they brought her here. Oh Lord, I said, bring the child here. Lord have mercy. Be quiet now. She had done stabbed herself with glass real deep. That blood was bleeding just like milking a cow. I got there and went to popping. You got to pop above that cut. You really got to pop it up. You understand? You got to beat the cut first and then go around and hit those veins. When you hit those veins, the blood runs out of there. I hit those veins and run right out of there, and then the blood is drained all over you. That's the main vein. I had popped it. I beat up above it, way above it, and I went all the way down to the foot. I just kept beating it like that, and it stopped bleeding in just a second. I didn't want to give her the lockjaw. All that causes the lockjaw. I beat it and mashed it and did everything I could until no blood would come. Then I took it and I hit it again and it was gone. I have I have a way to find your disease. I take your temperature with my hand. I just put it over your mouth and take your temperature with my finger. Then my hand just be hitting and finding that place in you wherever the disease is at. I find the disease like that because my hand is going to stay there. You can't move my hand. It's going to stay there, and you better believe that that's where the misery is at. All right. And so we go further down where she says, that's the way I work them over now. I get all the mangling and twist all over. You're sick somewhere. You gotta throw it out. You gotta get out, and I touch you and say, come here. Therefore, from that pillar of cloud, in the name of the Lord, the Spirit and the Holy Ghost, go, go. I tell them to get up now and go, and they're gone if the Lord's will. Prayer is the key to heaven. You pray and beg and plead and ask God to help you when you're sick. It's some growing and needful people in their homes. Now some of them is not able to get out and go to church. So people can go around and talk to them about the Bible and God and the church work, you see. When you're praying, your prayer goes to the Son, and the Son delivers the message to God. Then it's okay with God. He come back to the Son, and he'll send a message back to you as an answer. But when you come to be a Christian, and then he will send that message straight all the way through to you. When I get my holy reaction, I speak in tongues. I have been speaking in tongues for many years. My mouth will be popping open just like it was in the wintertime, and I just be speaking in tongues. Christ is talking to me. I'm not understanding the meaning of it. You see, I've spoken many times in tongues with my family, and they have too. To find Jesus, that was the onlyest way. I have more than one job. The Lord give you more than one job. Amen. He gives me singing and praying. I'm not a great singer, but when I do sing, they told me I opened my mouth too big for it. I told them that the Bible tells me there in Psalm to sing and make a joyful noise. So that what I does, I don't care how ugly I get on a job like that. I don't mind doing nothing for the Lord. When I'm doing my master will, what was promised on the pillar of cloud, I'm satisfied. All right. So so that's basically an elderly woman describing her root work and her healing. And she describes how important it is to go about healing the people and how important it is to pray. All right. So prayer is the most important thing for our ancestors, especially when it comes to healing and meditation. That's what they did. It was a form of meditation. It wasn't about really looking for a man in the sky to come and save them. It was about being able to heal themselves from the problem that they were going through, dealing with the psychological issues, dealing with reality, and how they can navigate through reality. And that was their way of doing that, by taking a problem over to God and praying it over and hoping that He will be the one to bring some form of healing. All right. So now, if you guys want to check out this book, the title of this book is called Give My Poor Heart Ease, Voices of the Mississippi Blues. All right, as you can see, that's BB King right there if you don't know who that is, but yeah, you can get that book. All right. So now, also, I was able to find a little bit more source, but this source is basically going into the documentary film about. All right, so this source right here come from Jasta.org, is basically just dealing with the review work of Fannie Bell Chapman, gospel singer by Bill Ferris. So it's all only thing is just a review work. So I'm not really gonna go into that. All right. And of course, you can find this book. You can also find this book, the same book that I was reading from. You can look it up on archive.org. Just go on the website and you can look up the book, check it out. I recommend people to go on archive if you don't want to buy anything from Amazon, or if you don't want to buy a physical copy, you can check out the book. It's like a online library. Okay, so it lets you check it out for an hour. It lets you check it out for like 14 days, and then you can recheck it out as many times you want to. Okay, so now let's get down to an article, interesting article here. This comes from Vice.com. Now it goes into the Mississippi hoodoo and root work and all. All right. So this article is a story about a man who came back as a roots healer. If you guys can, okay, there we go. So this article here, it says the last Mississippi root man. I died, met God, came back as a root healer. The first person story of Bishop Dickerson, one of the last roots workers in Mississippi. All right. So this came out on February the 2nd of 2018. It says Bishop Dickerson is an 83-year-old healer living in Osaka, Mississippi. As owner of the spiritual candle shop, he creates amulets and other talismanic items using roots, oils, candles, herbs, and various curos that are part of the African American folk magic pantheon. These are his own words as told to Justin Farnell over a series of interviews. I've been healing people out of this here shop since 1997, long before their folks would come over to my home to get their medicine. Sure, there are a lot of local people, but I've had patients come all the way from China to get some kind of work done. My main line of business is in healing. This isn't voodoo, this is roots work. Folks come here to get something bad off of them, not to put something bad on someone else. Mm. It says, I make spiritual bath candles and different kinds of mojo bags. I make the products here in this shop, and then we ship them up to botanicas and candle shops throughout the country. You find my baths in New York, Detroit, Chicago, Los Angeles, a lot of those cities. There are people in New York I have been doing business with for 40 years, and we have never even met. Over the years, companies have wanted to team up with me and expand into a larger market. I always thought about it, but the larger producers want you to cut your product and cheapen it with fillers. I can't do that. Same goes for folk who have tried to remake my personal recipes. I inherit a gift from my mother. That gift goes into each product, so it doesn't matter if you know my process or have my recipes. If you weren't born with the gift, it won't matter much when you put your hands on the product. Okay, so that's him. All right, making his medicine. You know, you're making his herbal remedy. So most days started by opening the shop and getting ready for consultation. Folks who are feeling bad come in and sit down in the waiting area in one of the chairs or on the couch. They come sit wherever they want except for the chair that has a sign on it that says, do not sit in this chair. My guardian spirit is sitting there watching over the shop. One day, one by one, I called them into the back room for a reading. People might come down for 100 different reasons. A lady might want her man to stop running around, or maybe he is a bad person and she want him out of her life. The right medicine is going to either keep him at home or push him on the down the road. I just help situation. I don't hurt them. We've done six consultation this morning and it isn't 10 a.m. All right, so that's the elderly man right here. So then it goes on to say a lot of people don't have any particular problem. They just want to enhance themselves. They want better luck with money, love, or just to give their spirit a stronger present. They walk in the room and you think to yourself, this person has something extra. That's what the mojo bag does. You can use plant roots for that. High John the Conqueror is an old root that the root they sang about in a lot of the oldest blues songs. I have always sold them. Even during the years they were hard to get. Some other root men would sell Little John to Chew and try to pass it off as High John. That's not right. You're gonna ruin your reputation for a short dollar. So yeah, if you ever listen to blues, you would notice that they're singing about hoodoos, right? You know what I'm saying? Like Muddy Water had a song called My Mojo Ain't Working or something like that. So he had a song called My Mojo Ain't Working. So basically he was singing about hoodoo. You know what I'm saying? So he came about the Mississippi area. All right. But yeah, a lot of those blues singers sung about the hoodoo practice. But they use the codes in it. So if you pay attention when you listen to blues and you listen to somebody like Muddy Water, you'll be able to hear it. You'll be like, mm, that's interesting. So it goes deep. And when we think of blues, we think about, someone having the blues, something very sad, something not as happy, you know what I'm saying? Just something where people can express their frustration, their pain, their sadness, loneliness. That's basically what blues is. So it's not really like dealing with a bunch of love songs and all of that, but it's just expressing like bad relationships, hard times they going through in life and all of that. Yeah, but when you listen to blues, they also talk about the hoodoo work, all right, root work, because a lot of those blues singers came from Mississippi and Tennessee area, all right, as well as Georgia. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue. The first time I ever heard the name of High John spoken out loud, I was a little boy. On Saturdays, all the men would gather under the big shade tree and talk while the women were in one of the houses cooking food. Children would just sit and listen. I remember one of the real old gentlemen talking about how all he needed to straighten his life out was a High John the Conqueror root. If he could just get his hands on me, he would spark some fresh ginger across the root like flint against steel. Eating that ginger would give him all the power he needed to really get his situation straight. Yes, indeed, I'm sure it would have too. All right, so again, this is the article, and that's the elder. As you can see, he's making his medicine, his remedy, right? So, but shout out to Mississippi. Shout out to Mississippi because they really keep that tradition going. Real talk. Mississippi, Louisiana, and Tennessee and South Carolina and various parts of Georgia. They keep the tradition of the ancestors going, and Florida as well. All right, so let's go back and look at who John the Conqueror is. Okay, so the elder mentioned John the Conqueror. Let's go back and look into that because I remember a while back. Now, who is John the Conqueror? Let's go back into the story about him. Um, all right. So John the Conqueror, also known as High John the Conqueror, John Jack, and many other folk variants, is a folk hero from African American folklore. Right? Now he is associated with the roots of Apomea Pugra, the the John the Conqueror root or John the Conqueror, to which magical powers are ascribed in American folklore, especially among the hoodoo tradition of folk magic. Buddy Waters mentioned him as Johnny Conqueror in the song Managed Boy and I'm Your Hoochie Coochie Man. In Managed Boy, the line is I think I'll go down to old Kansas too. I'm gonna try to bring back my second cousin, that little Johnny Conqueror. And I'm Your Hoochie Coochie Man is called John the Conqueror Blue. So As you can see here, it says sometimes John is an African prince, right? Son of a king of Congo, said to have ridden a giant cow called Old Familiar. He was sold as a slave in America. Despite his enslavement, his spirit was never broken. He survived in folklore as a London folk hero, a sort of trickster figure, because of the tricks he played to evade those who played tricks on him. Joe Chandler Harris, Beer Rabbit, and Beer Rabbit of the Uncle Remus stories is a similar archetype to that of High John the Conqueror, outdoing those who would do in him or would do him in. Zora Neale Hurston wrote of his invention, High John the Conqueror, in her folklore collection, The Sanctified Church. So in one traditional, the John the Conqueror story told by Virginia Hamilton and probably based on Jean the Soldier, Iule, the devil's daughter. John falls in love with the devil's daughter. The devil set John a number of impossible tasks. He must clear 60 acres of land in half and then sow it with corns and wheat in it the other half a day. So the devil's daughter furnished John with a magical axe and power that gets these impossible tasks done, but warned John that her father, the devil, means to kill him even if he performs them. John and the devil's daughter steal the devil's own horses. The devil pursued them, but they escape his clutches, shape shifting. So in High John the Conqueror, Zora Neale Hurston reports that, like King Arthur of England, he has served his people, and like King Arthur, he is not dead. He waits to return when his people shall call him again. High John the Conqueror went back to Africa, but he left his power here and placed his American dwelling in the root of a certain plant. Only possess that root, and he can be summoned at any time. So basically, John the Conqueror represented power and strength, right? So if you need that power and strength and you feel like you're weak, you would get that plant, and that plant will rejuvenate you, will bring you back to life, right? So, if I'm not mistaken, I think John Conqueror, because if you listen to a lot of African American folklore, right, is basically the story about the African mythology, but it's told in the American way. So they use a different number. They use different nomenclatures, but at the same time, it's still describing the same mythological gods. So John the Conqueror would be compared to Olodumare, which is the Ifa god, right? He'll be compared to Olodumare because the fact that they both have the strength and they both have a particular power, right? And they both are pretty mighty. So at the same time, it's told the same way, but it's just different nomenclature, right? And it's just translated over into English. That's all it is. So the African American folklore is nothing more than African mythology. And that's why I had to find out. So when I started looking at them, I said, well, it sounds pretty similar to African mythology, but that's all it is. It's just done in the African diaspora way. So our people is very clever of keeping the African tradition going, and they blend it in with the Western culture. So you don't even realize to this day, and I say it all the time, and I sound like a broken record. I do sound like a broken record, but I'm going to say it. You practice the African tradition that's incorporated in the American culture. I seen someone saying that they are African American, but not African as far as the fact that they are descended. The culture is different, and yeah, the practice and culture is different. Okay, true enough. The culture is different in a way because you're in a Western hemisphere. You're in a Western society. But if you was taken away from that Western culture, it's not so much of a difference. It's pretty much similar. You'll see a lot of the same practices. It's just that it's blended in within the Western culture. That's all it is. So would there be an African American culture without African in it? I mean, you can describe yourself as another ethnic group because at the end of the day, we are Neo-Africans. That's why I like to call ourselves Neo-Africans, because that's what we are. We are a new wave of Africans who descend from those Africans that were brought here from the continent. That's all we are. Neo-Africans. But at the same time, you keep up with a lot of those traditions, you practice a lot of those traditions that's very familiar in the African culture. You just happen to blend them in together. That's what you did. You blend those cultures together. All right. So enough of that. Let me show you guys another book. If you guys have not looked into this book right here, I think y'all need to. This book right here is called The Stories of Rootworkers and Hoodoo in the Mid South. All right, so I know some of y'all got this book. It's written by Tony Cal. All right, so it talks about the secret institution. Check this out. Watch this. I must go with him to another part of the woods where there was a certain root, which if I would take some of it with me, carry it always on my right side, would render it impossible for Covey or any other white man to whip me. Frederick Douglass. Now, check this out. It goes on to say, the practice of root work and conjure were born out of the healing and spiritual tradition of Africa. These rich traditions were kept alive in secret amid the abuse and violence of slavery. As slaves were brought into the Delta and families expanded through the Mid South, the practices that aided in their survival began to pour over into the public's eye. What was once hidden in plain sight was being observed by outsiders who, in most cases, ridiculed and shunned the practices, while a segment of non-practitioners feared, respected, and sometimes even used these traditions. The culture of hoodoo was so prolific throughout African American communities throughout the United States that its practice even garnered the attention of the President of the United States. In 1919, Woodrow Wilson stood before Congress as he was reaching into his pocket. He accidentally dropped a piece of red cloth. The president explained to the members of Congress and the press that he had dropped his conjure bag and that he kept it to help his rheumatism, and other problems. Wilson chuckled, as did the members of the Congress, while the concept of the conjure bag was being laughed at. It also became apparent that hoodoo had made quite an impact on the consciousness of the country. The once secret institution of healing and magic was no longer a secret. As the practices of Africa and African Americans began to reveal in Southern society, they also continued to be feared and demeaned. Reaction found in Mid South newspaper from Kentucky, Mississippi, and Tennessee, carried in other papers nationwide starting in the early 1920s, were quite alarming. So there was a lot of criticism about it. Check this out. Hoodoos or African witches are operating in Boyd County with frightful results. 7 colored citizens have already been driven to the madhouse by the alleged satanic influence of the hoodoos. Devil worship still exists. Voodoo practice originating in Africa have not lost their hold among Negroes in America. The witch doctor business thrived among the Negroes of the South and to some extent to the North. It is kind of magical art called voodoo and came originally from Africa. For a moderate price, you can buy a hoo-hoo package from a voodoo woman that is guaranteed if fastened to his front gate inconspicuously to cause your enemy to sicken and die. It contains such articles as bit of bones, a tooth, or 2 feathers. And it goes on to say, rumbling of African mumbo jumbo were heard in the juvenile court as delegation of Negroes came here from Athens, Tennessee to protest holding of a Negro girl named Susie. The delegation told Judge L.D. Miller that Susie, paroled from the state training school recently, was doing well and that charges against her were conjured up by that old hoodoo. So the practice of traditional healing and conjure were frequently looked as foolish superstitions by those outside of the African American community in the Mid South. Traditional practice that had been performed for years were often mocked in the public eye. Newspapers sharing reports of African American folk practices would typically describe them as described them in a condescending and racist manner. A 1906 news story in Natchez, Democrat outside of Natchez, Mississippi, shared the sentiments of many white Southerners at the time. The article, 40 Years of Freedom, Negro retained a foolish ideal as to the power of the conjure bag, said Mr. Austin Smith, owner of Saragossa Plantation, this county, drove into the city wearing a most amused smile on his always beaming face, and when questioned as to the witness and whereof for the smile, he said 40 years of freedom have not been enough to eradicate the idea from the Negro's mind that the contraband is the only thing that would keep witches off or break a hoodoo. Saying this, he extracted from his pocket a conjure bag that one of the Negroes on his place had dropped. It was a red flannel concern wrapped in 7 pieces and string and contained a piece of silver, a bit of graveyard dust, a piece of ladstone, and some hair from a graveyard rabbit's leg. The string was wrapped around the bag so that it left a long loop over the wrist, and the owner of the bag would hold the bag in the hand while shaking hands with the person they wished to conjure. In the case of driving witches away from the house, the Negroes waved the bag above the head, indulging in some kind of a monologue that is beyond understanding. So, news of pagan practices of African folk healing and culture became a popular topic among members of the wealthy upper class. Traditions were viewed as devilish and at the same time exotic to those outside of the culture. Newspapers in northern states ran articles about the southern Negro who participate in wild African rituals. Following a high profile incident in Montgomery, Alabama, involving a member of African healing culture, the Montgomery Advisor spoke of how a shabby, smelly room on Montgomery's Monroe Street would just have easily been a thatched hut in jungles of Haiti, and the witch woman who practiced her voodoo rites over a smelly brew could have readily been a sorceress of that island's of black magic. All right, so if you guys want to read any more into this book, it's called Stories of Rootworkers and Hoodoo in the Mid South. Okay, so hoodoo was looked at as as evil, um, and was looked at as basically devil worshiping. So the outsiders didn't really understand, but only those who were practitioner understood, and they got what hoodoo was really about. So people, at the end of the day, it don't matter what they practice, whether it be religion, whether it be hoodoo or spirituality, whatever, it's about the psychology of the person. It's not about the beliefs they go by or the um religious custom. It's about what they're doing psychologically, what their whole intention are. So if they have good intentions, they'll use religion for good intentions. But if they use these things for bad intentions, then that's what it's going to be used for bad intention. So it depends on the people. So just because a person practice certain thing does not necessarily make it bad, or does not always make it good. All right. Anyway, so that's all I gotta say. So I hope you guys have a good one. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Shout out to Big Creek Money. Shout out to Centavo. Shout out to uh Name Ubuntu. All right. That's brother Robert. So shout out to you guys. Thank you guys for coming through. And let me see if anybody else got anything they want to share on here. Uh all right, so no commentaries. Okay, cool. All right, y'all have a great one, and I will talk to you guys later. Make sure you guys check out all my other videos on here. Until next time, peace and power elevation. This your girl Tiffany. I'm logging off. Be safe. All right.